The briefing room aboard the orbital station hummed with the energy of a dozen different species. Commander Thelax stood at the front, his forearms moving in practiced gestures as holographic images flickered above the central table. The insectoid officer's compound eyes scanned the assembled warriors, each one representing the finest their species had to offer. Zareth 7, Thelax began, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into standard galactic. The Krathun have fortified the northern mountains. Intelligence suggests they're developing weapons that could shift the balance of this war. Your mission is to infiltrate, gather data, and if possible, destroy their research facility. Around the table stood 7 warriors, and each one was impressive in their own right. Krev, the Bruloth, stood nearly 3 meters tall. His thick armored hide could regenerate from most weapons fire. He crossed his massive arms and grunted his understanding. Next to him, 2 Cyric scouts named Scylla and Vex practically vibrated with nervous energy. Their species could move faster than most sensors could track, and their reflexes were legendary. A Zenmora named Lithin floated slightly above her seat, her translucent form pulsing with soft light. She was their telepathic coordinator, able to link minds across vast distances. 2 Krath brothers, Dorn and Fel, checked their plasma weapons. The reptilian warriors were known for their tactical precision and their ability to survive in any environment. And then there was the human. He arrived last, slipping through the door with barely a sound. The others turned to look, and more than one set of eyes showed disappointment. He was average height, maybe 1.8 meters. His build was lean, nothing like Krev's massive frame. He wore standard coalition combat armor, scuffed and worn from use. His face was unremarkable, with short dark hair and brown eyes that seemed to take in everything without expression. Marcus Chen moved to an empty spot at the table and stood quietly, hands clasped behind his back. Scylla leaned toward her partner and whispered, "That's the human? I expected more." Vex chittered softly in agreement. No natural weapons, no armor plating, no enhanced senses. Why is he even here? Commander Thelax continued the briefing, explaining the terrain, the expected resistance, and the extraction points. Marcus listened without speaking, his eyes moving from the holographic maps to each of his teammates and back again. He seemed to be cataloging everything, storing it away. "Equipment check in 30 minutes, Thelax announced. Drop time is in 6 hours. Get your gear ready and get some rest." This won't be easy. The warriors dispersed, heading to the armory or their quarters. Marcus followed at a distance, still silent. In the armory, the team gathered their weapons and supplies. Krev hefted a heavy plasma cannon that would have crushed a human, spinning it with ease. The Cyric scouts checked their lightweight rifles and vibroblades. Lithin needed no weapons, her mental powers sufficient for combat. Marcus selected a standard rifle, a pistol, extra ammunition, and several devices that the others didn't recognize. He worked methodically, checking each piece of equipment twice. "Hey, human," Krev called out, his voice like grinding stone. "You got a name, or should we just call you human?" Marcus looked up from his equipment. "Chen, Marcus Chen. Chen," Krev repeated, testing the name. "And you've done this kind of work before?" "Yes, where?" "Several places. Helvask Prime, Meridian Station, Talvaron." Dorn, one of the Krath brothers, looked up sharply. "Talvaron? That was a nightmare mission. Poison atmosphere, hostile terrain. Most of the team died." Marcus's expression didn't change. "Yes, but you made it out," Fel said, more respectful now. "Yes." Scylla darted over, moving so fast she was just a blur. She stopped centimeters from Marcus, studying him closely. "You don't look like much. No offense, but humans aren't exactly known as warriors. You're weak compared to Bruloth, slow compared to us. Your senses are dull compared to most species. So what's your specialty? Tech? Demolitions?" Marcus met her gaze calmly. "Infantry, reconnaissance, extended operations." "Extended operations?" Scylla laughed. "That's fancy talk for nothing special." From across the armory, Thelax's voice cut through the conversation. "Does anyone need to know Chen's call sign?" There was a pause. Call signs were important in the coalition forces. They often told you everything you needed to know about a warrior. "Sure," Krev said, grinning. "What do they call you, human?" "Something compensating for being so average?" Marcus hesitated just for a moment. His jaw tightened slightly. "Reaper." The word hung in the air. Scylla burst out laughing. "Reaper? Really?" "That's silent," Thelax snapped. The commander had gone completely still, all four of his arms frozen mid-motion. Several senior officers who had been working nearby also stopped. The amusement drained from Sila's face as she noticed the reactions around her. What did I miss? Lieutenant Korn, a veteran Velkari officer, set down the equipment he was holding very carefully. He looked at Marcus with what might have been respect or fear. You're that Reaper? From Helvask? Marcus nodded once. Oh, Korn said quietly. He turned to the younger warriors. Carry on, just carry on. Krev frowned, looking between Marcus and the senior officers. I don't understand. What's special about later? Thelax interrupted. We have work to do. Chen, your equipment is approved. Everyone, finish your preparations and report to the drop bay in 5 hours. Dismissed. The team dispersed, but the atmosphere had changed. Sayla kept glancing at Marcus, her earlier mockery replaced with confusion. Krev watched the human with new interest. Even the Zenmora, Lethan, seemed to focus more attention on him. Marcus finished his equipment check as if nothing had happened. He loaded his gear onto a transport cart and headed toward the quarters assigned to him. In the corridor, he passed Lieutenant Korn again. The older officer nodded. Good to have you on this one, Reaper. Might actually give us a chance. We'll see, Marcus replied. How long has it been since you slept? Marcus considered the question. 18 hours. I'll get some rest before the drop. Make sure you do. We need you sharp. In his quarters, Marcus set his gear down and sat on the edge of the narrow bed. He pulled out a small data pad and began reviewing the mission files again. He studied the terrain maps, the fortress layouts, the enemy force estimates. His eyes moved rapidly across the screen, absorbing every detail. After an hour, he lay back and closed his eyes. His breathing slowed, became regular. But even as he rested, part of his mind continued working, running through scenarios, calculating possibilities, preparing for what was to come. In the common area, Sila found Vex and pulled him aside. Find out what you can about that human. About this Reaper call sign. Something has the senior officer spooked. Vex nodded and scurried off. He returned 20 minutes later, his eyes wide. Well, Sela demanded. I accessed his service record. Sela, his missions, they're all classified above our clearance level. But the summaries, Vex's voice dropped to a whisper. Helvask Prime. He pursued an enemy commander across an entire continent alone for 6 weeks. He didn't stop, ever. Sila's confident expression faltered. 6 weeks? Without support. Without resupply after the first week. The enemy commander finally collapsed from exhaustion and terror. Meridian Station. He coordinated defenses for 90 hours straight without sleep when their command staff was killed. Talvaron, he completed his mission after his entire team died. The reports don't say exactly what he did, but 3 different enemy commanders specifically requested transfers off any world where humans were operating. Sila looked toward the quarters where Marcus was resting. He's just one human, average, nothing special about his species. Vex met her eyes. That's what everyone thinks, until they see what average means for a human in a long fight. The record says he's completed 17 missions that were classified as impossible. 17, Sila, and he's never failed one. Everyone fails eventually. Maybe, Vex said. But apparently humans don't know when to quit. And that one, he gestured toward Marcus's quarters. They say he doesn't know the meaning of the word stop. In his quarters, Marcus's eyes opened. He checked his chrono. 3 hours until drop time. He stood, ran through a series of stretches, and began checking his equipment one more time. His face showed no emotion, no fear, no excitement, just the patient, methodical preparation of someone who had done this many times before. Someone who always saw the mission through to the end, no matter how long it took. The drop pod shook violently as it entered Zareth 7's atmosphere. Inside, the 8 warriors sat strapped into their harness seats, weapons secured between their knees. The metal hull screamed as friction heated it to dangerous levels. Red emergency lighting bathed everything in an ominous glow. Krev seemed unbothered, his massive frame absorbing the turbulence easily. The Cyric scouts, Scylla and Vex, had their eyes closed, their bodies tense and ready. Lithan floated in her restraints, her telepathic presence touching each team member's mind with reassuring calm. The Krath brothers checked their weapons for the 10th time. Marcus sat perfectly still, eyes open, staring at nothing in particular. His breathing was slow and controlled. He might have been sitting in a quiet room instead of a burning pod falling toward a hostile planet. The pod hit the ground hard, restraints released automatically, and the side hatches blew outward with explosive charges. Hot, humid air rushed in, carrying the scent of alien vegetation and something else, something chemical and wrong. Move, Thelax commanded. Form up, standard dispersal pattern. The team poured out of the pod and into the dense jungle of Zareth 7. Massive trees with purple-black bark stretched toward a green-tinted sky. The undergrowth was thick, full of thorny plants and strange fungi that pulsed with bioluminescence. The air was so humid it felt like breathing water. Krev immediately began to overheat. His species had evolved on a cold world, and his thick armor plating was meant for different conditions. Within minutes he was panting, vapor rising from his body. Scylla and Vex fared better with movement, but the dense foliage confused their enhanced senses. Every plant, every insect, every drop of water registered as a potential threat to their hyperactive nervous systems. Lithin's telepathy was being disrupted by the local wildlife. Something about the planet's ecosystem created mental static that made her abilities unreliable at best. Marcus pulled a small scanner from his belt and checked their position. Fortress is 23 kilometers northeast. Terrain will get rougher after the first 10 clicks. How do you feel, human? Krev asked, still panting. Too hot for you? It's warm, Marcus agreed. Manageable. They moved through the jungle in formation with the Cyric scouts ranging ahead. After 2 hours of hiking, Scylla reported back. Enemy patrol 300 meters ahead. 6 Krathun soldiers, standard weapons. They haven't detected us. Thelax considered their options. We could bypass them. Stay undetected. Or we could eliminate them, Dorn suggested. 6 against 8. Easy victory. Marcus spoke quietly from his position at the rear. Recommend bypass. Any engagement alerts the fortress. They'll know something is wrong when the patrol doesn't report in. Fell shook his head. That gives them time to investigate. Better to hit fast and hard, take them out before they can signal. They'll signal the moment they see us, Marcus said. Standard protocol. And we're 90 seconds from their communication range to the fortress. That's enough time to send an alert. Krev grunted. You seem very sure of that, human. It's what I'd do. Thelax made the decision. We engage. Quick and quiet. Cyric scouts take flanking positions. Krev, your frontal assault. Everyone else, support. Chen, hang back and cover our retreat if needed. Marcus said nothing, but his jaw tightened slightly. The team moved into position. The Krathun patrol was moving through a clearing. Reptilian soldiers with thick scales and heavy weapons. They seemed relaxed, not expecting trouble this far from any coalition positions. Thelax gave the signal. Krev charged forward with a roar, his plasma cannon lighting up the jungle. The Cyric scouts became blurs of motion, appearing behind 2 Krathun soldiers and cutting them down before they could react. Dorn and Fell laid down covering fire. But Marcus had been right. The first Krathun to see Krev had just enough time to hit his emergency beacon before a plasma bolt took him in the chest. The signal went out, a brief burst of data that shot toward the fortress 20 kilometers away. The fight was over in 30 seconds. All 6 Krathun were dead, but the damage was done. Fortress is alerted, Marcus said, checking his scanner. They received the emergency pulse. We have maybe 2 hours before they send out search teams. Thelax's mandibles clicked in frustration. Move out. Double time. We need to reach the fortress before they organize a response. The team ran through the jungle, and now speed was more important than stealth. Krev struggled with the heat and pace. Lithin had to break telepathic contact entirely because of the mental static and her need to focus on moving. The Krath brothers handled it well, but even they were starting to show signs of fatigue after an hour of running. Marcus kept pace easily, his breathing steady. He seemed to have found a rhythm, a sustainable speed that he could maintain indefinitely. While others began to slow, he continued without change. They reached a river and had to cross. The water was fast-moving and chest-deep. Krev nearly lost his footing on the slippery rocks. Vex was swept downstream and had to be pulled out by his partner. Marcus crossed methodically, testing each step, using the current instead of fighting it. He was the third one across, helping secure a line for the others. By the time they established camp 6 hours later, everyone was exhausted except Marcus. He volunteered for first watch without being asked. You don't need rest? Scylla asked, watching him as she cleaned mud from her equipment. I'll rest after my watch. How long can humans go without sleep? Marcus considered the question. Depends on the human. And the situation. I've gone 4 days before I started making serious mistakes. Sela stared at him. 4 days? That's impossible. It's difficult, but possible. She wanted to ask more, but Vex called her over to help with something. Marcus settled into a position with good sight lines and began his watch. His eyes moved constantly, scanning the jungle, looking for threats, but part of his mind was elsewhere, analyzing what he'd seen. The fortress was going to be heavily defended now. Their element of surprise was gone. The mission had just become much harder. He ran through scenarios, calculating possibilities. Most of them ended badly for the team. Around the camp, the other warriors slept fitfully. The jungle was never quiet. Strange sounds echoed through the trees. Bioluminescent insects danced in the darkness. The humidity made everything feel damp and uncomfortable. Marcus sat motionless, watching, thinking, planning. 4 hours later, he woke Dorn for the next watch. All quiet. Sensor grid is active. Wake me if anything changes. Get some rest, human. We need everyone sharp tomorrow. Marcus found a spot with good drainage and lay down. Within minutes, his breathing slowed to the rhythm of sleep. But even sleeping, he seemed alert somehow, as if part of him was still on watch. Dorn observed him for a moment, then turned his attention to the jungle. He thought about what Vex had told them earlier about Marcus's service record, about Helvask Prime and the 6-week pursuit, about missions that should have been impossible. Looking at the sleeping human, Dorn tried to see what made him special. But Marcus just looked ordinary, average, nothing remarkable. And yet senior officers treated his name with respect. Enemy commanders feared him enough to request transfers. Something about this unremarkable human made him dangerous. Dorn couldn't figure it out. In his sleep, Marcus's face remained calm, expressionless. No dreams seemed to trouble him. His breathing stayed slow and regular. His hands, resting on his chest, were relaxed but positioned so he could reach his weapons in an instant if needed. In the morning, they would reach the fortress. They would see just how badly the alerted defense had prepared for them. The mission was already compromised, already much harder than it should have been. But Marcus didn't seem worried about that. He never seemed worried about anything. He just kept going, one step at a time, one watch at a time, one mission at a time. Like something that didn't know how to quit, like something inevitable. The fortress rose from the mountainside like a jagged tooth. Massive walls of reinforced metal and stone stretched 50 meters high. Automated defense turrets tracked in slow arcs across the approaches. Guard towers bristled with sensors and weapons. And everywhere, Krathun soldiers moved in organized patterns. From their observation point 3 kilometers away, the team studied their target through enhanced optics. Thelax's mandibles clicked in agitation. Intelligence was wrong. Very wrong. They said minimal defenses. This is a full military installation. Krev counted the visible guards. I see at least 200 soldiers, probably more inside. Automated defenses covering every approach, Sela added. No blind spots that I can see. Lithan's voice was worried in their minds. I sense many more inside. This is not just a research facility. It's a command center. Dorn looked at Fel. We need to abort. Call for extraction. This is beyond our capabilities, Thelax began to agree. Contacting command for... Wait, Marcus said softly. He had been silent for the past hour, just watching through his scope, occasionally making notes on a data pad. Everyone turned to look at him. We're 23 kilometers from the extraction point, Marcus continued. The jungle between here and there is now crawling with search teams looking for whoever killed that patrol. They'll find our trail eventually. When they do, we'll be caught between the fortress and their search parties. So we fight our way to extraction, Krev said. Against 200 soldiers plus search teams, we'd be dead in an hour. Thelax's compound eyes studied Marcus. What are you suggesting? Marcus zoomed in on a section of the fortress wall. I've been watching for the past hour. Guard rotations every 4 hours. Supply convoy arrived 38 minutes ago. Another is scheduled based on the gate activity patterns. Automated defenses have overlapping fields of fire, but they're optimized for frontal assault, not sustained irregular action. So? Sila asked. So we don't assault the fortress. We besiege it. There was a long silence. 8 warriors, Krev said slowly. Besiege a fortress with 200 defenders? Human, that's insane. Marcus's expression didn't change. Not besiege in the traditional sense. We can't starve them out or surround them, but we can make them exhausted, paranoid, and inefficient. He pulled up his datapad and projected a holographic map. The Cthulhu sleep cycle is approximately 18 hours awake, 6 hours rest. Right now, based on their activity levels, they're about 12 hours into their wake cycle. In 6 hours, a significant portion of them will need to sleep. What does that matter? Vex asked. Because we won't let them sleep. We hit them with random attacks, loud and visible, but not directly engaging. Every time their rest cycle begins, we make noise. We make them think we're attacking. After 72 hours without proper rest, their efficiency drops 40%. Their reaction time doubles. They make mistakes. Thelex leaned forward. Humans use these tactics? It's called sleep deprivation warfare. Psychological operations. My species has been doing it for thousands of years. We're good at it because we evolved to function on interrupted sleep. Most species aren't, Dorn shook his head. 72 hours? We'd be exhausted too. We work in shifts. 2-person teams, 4-hour rotations. Everyone gets 8 hours of rest per cycle. Not great, but sustainable. The fortress defenders can't work in shifts because they don't know where we'll hit next. They have to maintain full alert status. Sela's eyes widened with understanding. You're not trying to kill them. You're trying to break them. Yes, after 72 hours, we attack for real. They'll be slow, making mistakes, seeing threats that aren't there. 8 rested warriors against 200 exhausted soldiers who can't think straight. Krev laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. That's the most human thing I've ever heard. Instead of fighting strong enemies, you make them weak first, Marcus nodded. It's more efficient. It's cruel, Lithan said quietly. It keeps us alive. And it works. Thelex considered the plan. It went against every instinct he had as a warrior. Direct confrontation was honorable. This was something else. But they were out of options. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he remembered the briefing files about human warfare. About how they won battles not through superior strength, but through superior patience and psychological manipulation. How long have you been planning this? The commander asked. Since we saw the fortress. 23 hours ago. You haven't slept since then. No. And you can function for at least another 50 hours before my efficiency drops significantly, more if needed. Sela stared at Marcus with new eyes. You're serious? You can actually go 3 days without sleep and still fight effectively. It's not pleasant, but yes, Thelax made his decision. We do it. Chen, you have tactical command for this operation. Everyone follows his orders exactly. No deviations, no heroics. Understood? The team acknowledged, though Krev looked unhappy about taking orders from the human. Marcus immediately began organizing. Krev and Dorn, first team. In 6 hours, you'll approach the eastern wall and create a disturbance. Loud, visible, but maintain distance. Make them think an attack is coming. Then withdraw. Sela and Fel, your second team. 4 hours after the first team, you hit the northern approach. Same pattern. Vex and Lithan, third team. Western approach. Commander, you and I are fourth team, southern approach. What kind of disturbance? Krev asked. Explosions, weapons fire, whatever makes them think we're beginning an assault. The key is to be loud and visible, but never close enough for them to actually engage effectively. We want them awake, alert, and stressed, not fighting. Over the next 6 hours, Marcus refined the plan obsessively. He calculated sight lines, approach routes, withdrawal paths. He timed everything down to the minute. He briefed each team on what to do if things went wrong. The others rested in shifts, but Marcus never stopped working. He maintained watch, refined plans, studied the fortress through his scope, looking for any detail he might have missed. When Sila woke from her rest period, she found Marcus in exactly the same position he'd been in 4 hours earlier. Eyes still pressed to his scope. Have you moved at all? She asked. Bathroom break 3 hours ago. Water 30 minutes ago. You're not tired? Marcus lowered the scope and looked at her. His eyes were clear, focused, showing no signs of fatigue. I'm tired. But it doesn't matter. The plan matters. Your survival matters. My discomfort doesn't matter. That's... Sela struggled for words. That's disturbing. Yes, but effective. She sat beside him watching the fortress. Why do you do this? These missions. You could work in command, safe in an orbital station. Your record qualifies you for any position. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I'm good at this. At making impossible things possible. At outlasting problems until they break. Someone has to do it. Might as well be me, but doesn't it hurt? Going without sleep, pushing yourself past limits? Yes, then why? Because my team goes home alive. That's worth some hurt. Sela thought about that. In her species, warriors fought for glory. for the thrill of speed and skill. The idea of deliberately enduring pain and exhaustion for days just to win seemed alien. Wrong, even. But looking at Marcus's calm, patient expression, she began to understand something. This was what made humans dangerous. Not strength or speed or fancy technology. Just the simple, terrifying willingness to keep going long after everyone else had quit. Time, Marcus said, checking his chrono. Wake Krev and Dorn. First harassment begins in 30 minutes. As Sela went to wake the others, Marcus returned to his scope. The fortress looked impenetrable. 200 warriors against 8. Impossible odds by any normal calculation. But Marcus didn't believe in normal calculations. He believed in patience, in endurance. In the long game, the Krathun in that fortress didn't know it yet, but they'd already lost. Not today, not tomorrow. But in 72 hours, when exhaustion and fear had done its work, they would break. And Marcus would still be here, watching, waiting, patient as stone. That's what made him the Reaper. Not speed or strength, just the absolute certainty that he would still be here when everyone else had given up. Still here, always. Hour 38 of the siege. The fortress that had looked so impenetrable 2 days ago now seemed like a nervous animal, twitching at shadows. Marcus watched through his scope as another team of Krathun soldiers rushed to investigate an explosion on the eastern wall. The third false alarm in an hour. They were moving slower now, their formations loose and undisciplined. Several soldiers stumbled over their own feet. They're breaking down, Thelax observed from beside him. The commander had learned much about human warfare in the past 2 days. Mostly that it was patient, methodical, and deeply unsettling. Not yet, Marcus replied. But soon. Another 30 hours. Thelax made a sound that might have been a sigh. I have fought in 17 campaigns. Never like this. Always we met the enemy in battle. Strength against strength. Now that works when you're stronger. When you're weaker, you need different approaches. Down below, a Krathun officer was screaming at his troops. Even at this distance, Marcus could see the stress in their movements. They'd been awake for nearly 40 hours now, constantly responding to attacks that never came. Their nerves were shredded. The rotation had worked perfectly. Every 4 hours, a different team would approach a different section of the fortress and create chaos. Explosions. Weapons fire. False signals that suggested a major assault was beginning. And every time, the fortress garrison had to respond with full force. Rushing to defensive positions, preparing for battle, and every time, the coalition team would vanish before real combat could begin. The psychological effect was devastating. The Krathun couldn't rest. Every time they tried to sleep, another alarm sounded. Their commanders couldn't organize proper rest rotations because they never knew where the next attack would come from. Everyone had to stay alert. Everyone had to be ready, except humans could handle this. And humans were organizing the rotation. Marcus's team was well rested by comparison. 8 hours of sleep per rotation. Regular meals. Time to recover between their harassment runs. They were tired, certainly, but functional. Sharp. The fortress garrison was falling apart. Krev returned from the latest harassment run with Lithin. The massive Bruloth was grinning, his earlier skepticism about Marcus's plan completely gone. They shot at shadows for 5 minutes after we left, he reported. Their own automated defenses. 3 soldiers injured by friendly fire before they regained control. Lethin's telepathic voice was troubled. Their minds are chaotic. Fear, exhaustion, paranoia. They're starting to see threats everywhere. Some of them are breaking. Good, Marcus said without emotion. That's the point. It seems cruel. Marcus turned to look at the Zenmora. What's cruel is letting my team die in a direct assault against 200 defenders. This way we all go home. They surrender or flee and nobody has to die. You really think they'll surrender? When we hit them for real, yes. They're too exhausted to fight effectively now. When they see actual combat, they'll break immediately. Sila and Vex returned next. The Cyric scouts were energized, enjoying the speed and stealth the harassment runs required. Sila bounded over to Marcus. I saw something interesting. Their northern tower, the one we hit 6 hours ago, only half-staffed now. I think they're pulling soldiers from fixed defenses to create a mobile reserve. Marcus pulled up his datapad and made notes. Smart move by their commander. He's adapting, but it opens up gaps. Should we exploit them? Not yet. Let them thin out their defenses more. Another day, They'll be making bigger mistakes. Dorn and Fell came back last, bringing news that several Krathun soldiers had been seen fighting among themselves. Exhaustion and stress were causing discipline to break down. Their commander is losing control, Fell observed. I could hear him screaming threats at his own troops. Marcus checked his chrono. Hour 42, 30 more hours to go. He ran calculations in his head, adjusting the harassment schedule based on the new information. They could push harder on the northern approach now. Maybe add an extra run on the eastern wall to force the commander to spread his mobile reserve thinner. Everyone rest, he ordered. Next rotation in 3 hours. Krev and Dorn, you're up. Northern approach this time. I want you to hold position for an extra 2 minutes. Make them think you're really committing to an assault, then withdraw as usual. As the others moved to their rest areas, Thelax stayed with Marcus. You haven't slept in 42 hours, the commander said. No. You need to rest. You're not invincible. Marcus smiled slightly, a rare expression. I'll rest after the next rotation. Someone needs to maintain watch and coordinate. I can do that. With respect, Commander, you've been awake for 30 hours yourself. Your species needs more sleep than humans. I can go longer before my efficiency drops. Thelax wanted to argue but couldn't. It was true. He was exhausted. His coordination was suffering. Another 12 hours and he'd be a liability. But Marcus still seemed sharp. Tired, certainly. His eyes were slightly red, his movements a fraction slower, but his mind was still working, still calculating, still adjusting the plan to account for changing conditions. Why are humans like this? Thelax asked. Every other species has limits they can't push past. But humans just continue. Marcus thought about the question. My species evolved as persistence hunters. We're not fast like Syrinx, not strong like Bruloth, not naturally armored or enhanced. So we developed different advantages. We can run for hours. We can function on little sleep. We can adapt to almost any environment. We don't quit. It sounds exhausting. It is. But it's also what kept us alive when we were weak and the world was full of predators stronger than us. We couldn't outfight them, so we outlasted them, ran them down until they collapsed from exhaustion, tracked them for days until they were too tired to run anymore. Thelax tried to imagine hunting that way, following prey relentlessly day after day, never stopping. It seemed less like hunting and more like inevitability. That's what you're doing now, isn't it? To this fortress. You're not fighting them. You're running them down. Yes. And they don't realize it yet. No. They think this is a siege. They're waiting for the main assault. They don't understand that this is the assault. This exhaustion, this fear, this is the weapon. When we finally attack in 30 hours, it'll just be cleanup. Down in the fortress, another alarm sounded. Soldiers stumbled to defensive positions. Officers shouted orders. Automated defenses tracked toward nothing. Marcus watched impassively. He wasn't cruel. He took no joy in their suffering. But he would use every tool available to complete the mission and keep his team alive. If that meant breaking the enemy's will before engaging them directly, so be it. Hour 48. The second rotation began. Then the third. Then the fourth. Marcus coordinated everything, making micro-adjustments to the plan, exploiting weaknesses as they appeared. He ran calculations constantly, predicting what the fortress commander would do next, adjusting harassment runs to counter those moves. He slept in 2-hour blocks when he could, always near his communicator, always ready to wake instantly if something changed. By hour 60, the fortress was a disaster. Soldiers were hallucinating from exhaustion. 2 had shot each other during a panic. Several had deserted into the jungle. The commander had stopped giving coherent orders. By hour 68, Marcus observed 3 Krathun soldiers sleeping at their posts. Nobody woke them. Their fellow soldiers were too tired to notice or care. 4 more hours, Marcus said quietly. Then we go in. His team gathered around him. They were tired but ready. They'd been resting in proper rotations for 3 days, while their enemy had been systematically destroyed by exhaustion and fear. Krev looked at Marcus with something approaching awe. I understand now. Why they call you Reaper. You don't fight. You just wait until fighting isn't necessary anymore. Marcus checked his weapons one final time. Fighting should always be the last option. It's messy. People die. Better to win before the battle starts. Not very glorious. Glory doesn't keep you alive. Patience does. Sela moved closer, her earlier mockery long gone. On the station, I laughed at your call sign. I thought it was compensation. I was wrong. Most people think that at first because you look ordinary. Yes, tactically useful. Enemy underestimates you. By the time they realize the mistake, it's too late. Thelax assembled the team. 4 hours. Everyone prepare. This is our only chance. If Chen's plan works, this will be easy. If it doesn't, we die quickly. Questions? Nobody had questions. They'd learned to trust the patient human who never quit. They'd learned what the Reaper really was, not a fighter, but something far more dangerous, something inevitable. Hour 72. Dawn was breaking over Zareth 7, painting the fortress walls in shades of amber and gold. Marcus crouched at the edge of the jungle, studying his target one final time. Inside those walls, 200 Krathun soldiers were at the breaking point. 72 hours without proper sleep. 72 hours of constant false alarms. 72 hours of fear and exhaustion eating away at their discipline, their cohesion, their will to fight. Marcus's team was ready behind him. 8 warriors who had eaten, slept, and prepared while their enemy fell apart. The contrast was stark. His team was alert, weapons ready, eyes clear. The fortress garrison was a shambling nightmare of exhausted soldiers who jumped at shadows. Final positions, Marcus said quietly into his communicator. Remember, move fast but not recklessly. They're exhausted but still armed. Expect confusion, panic, and surrender. If you see organized resistance, fall back and report. But I don't think we will. The team split up, moving to their assigned breach points. Marcus had identified the weakest sections of the fortress defenses. The northern tower, now critically understaffed. The eastern wall, where soldiers had been sleeping at their posts. The southern gate, where the commander had pulled defenders to reinforce other areas. On my mark, Marcus said. He watched the fortress, waiting for the exact moment when the night shift would be at their most vulnerable, when the exhaustion would be at its peak, when even the automated defenses would be cycling through maintenance protocols. There. The moment. Execute. Krev and Dorn hit the northern tower like a thunderstrike, but instead of retreating like they had for 3 days, they kept coming. They blasted through the undermanned defenses in seconds. The few Krathun soldiers present were too slow, too tired to react effectively. Most simply raised their hands in surrender when they saw the massive Bruloth bearing down on them. Sela and Vex became blurs of motion, scaling the eastern wall before the exhausted defenders could even process what was happening. Weapons clattered to the ground as Krathun soldiers gave up without fighting. Some were literally sleeping and had to be shaken awake to surrender. Lithin and Fel took the western approach, and Lithin's telepathic abilities, no longer disrupted by distance and jungle interference, touched the minds of the defenders. What she found there made her recoil. Pure exhaustion, terror, confusion. These warriors had nothing left. At her gentle mental suggestion, they simply sat down and waited for capture. Marcus and Thelax approached the main gate. The commander had expected this to be the most heavily defended point. Instead, they found it barely guarded at all. The fortress commander had spread his forces so thin, trying to cover every possible attack vector, that he'd left his front door vulnerable. The gate controls were unmanned. Marcus disabled the automated defenses with practiced efficiency. The massive doors swung open. They walked into the fortress unopposed. Inside was chaos. Krathun soldiers stumbled around in confusion. Some were still responding to false alarms from hours ago. Others had simply collapsed from exhaustion. Officers screamed contradictory orders that nobody followed. Marcus moved through the corridors with calm purpose, his weapon up but barely needed. Everywhere they went, defenders surrendered immediately. Some seemed relieved. The nightmare was finally over. They found the fortress commander in the command center, hunched over a tactical display. He was a large Krathun with scarred scales and 3 battle decorations on his chest, a veteran warrior. But his eyes were bloodshot, his movements uncoordinated, his voice hoarse from 3 days of shouting orders. He looked up as Marcus entered. For a moment, confusion crossed his face, then recognition, then something that might have been respect or might have been resignation. You, the commander said in heavily accented galactic standard. The Reaper. Marcus nodded slowly. Commander, order your troops to stand down. This fortress is taken. How? We outnumbered you 25-1. You were exhausted. We were rested. Numbers don't matter when you can't fight effectively. The Krathun commander stared at Marcus, trying to understand. For 3 days we waited for your assault. 3 days of attacks that never came. 3 days of... He trailed off, finally understanding. You weren't preparing to attack. That was the attack. Yes. You didn't fight us at all. You just waited. Until we couldn't fight back. Marcus lowered his weapon slightly. Will you surrender, Commander? Your soldiers are finished. This can end without more bloodshed. The commander looked around his command center, at his exhausted staff, at the tactical displays showing his entire defensive network collapsed, at the reality of his complete defeat by an enemy that had never truly engaged him in battle. What are you? He asked quietly. Your species. You're not strong like Bruloth, not fast like Syrinx. You have no natural weapons, no enhanced abilities. What makes you so dangerous? Marcus considered the question. We're persistence hunters, Commander. My species evolved to run down prey across days and weeks. We're not fast, but we don't stop. We're not strong, but we don't quit. We're not the best at any one thing, but we're good enough at everything. And we can keep going long after everyone else has collapsed. For 3 days you've been hunting us. Yes. And we never had a chance, did we? From the moment you decided to do this, our defeat was inevitable. Yes. The Krathun commander made a gesture of submission, lowering his head and spreading his arms. I surrender. My fortress, my soldiers, my command. They're yours. Throughout the fortress, the fighting ended. There had barely been any fighting to begin with. A few shots fired, a few minor struggles, but mostly just exhausted soldiers giving up, grateful that the nightmare was over. The coalition team secured the facility within an hour. They captured 200 soldiers, a major command center, and extensive intelligence on Krathun operations in the sector. And they did it with 0 fatalities and only minor injuries. As medics arrived to treat the exhausted Krathun soldiers, Crave approached Marcus. The massive warrior looked at the human with new understanding. I thought war was about strength, Crave said. About courage in battle? About testing yourself against worthy opponents. Sometimes it is, Marcus agreed. But mostly it's about achieving objectives while keeping your people alive. Everything else is secondary. You didn't defeat them in battle. No, I defeated them before the battle started. Better that way. Scylla joined them, looking around at the surrendered garrison. On the station, Vex told me about your missions. About Helvask Prime, where you pursued that commander for 6 weeks. I didn't understand how that was possible. I do now. Oh? You don't fight like a predator. You fight like something that evolved to never give up the hunt. You just keep coming. Keep going. Until your enemy breaks from exhaustion and fear. That's terrifying. Marcus smiled slightly. That's the idea. Fear is a powerful weapon. If the enemy is too scared to fight effectively, you've already won. Thelax approached, his forearms gesturing in satisfaction. Coalition Command is pleased. This fortress was supposed to take weeks to capture with heavy casualties. We did it in 3 days with 0 deaths. The plan worked, Marcus said simply. Because you understand something most warriors don't. That patience is more powerful than strength. That psychology is more effective than weapons. That human... Thelax paused, searching for words. That humans are terrifying because you simply never stop. Ever. We stop, Marcus corrected. When the mission is complete and everyone is safe, then we stop. Later, during the debriefing with Coalition Command, Marcus stood before the holographic display showing commanders from a dozen species. They all listened as Thelax explained the operation. How 8 warriors had defeated 200 through psychological warfare and systematic exhaustion. One commander, a Velkari admiral, asked the question everyone was thinking. Reaper, could you have defeated them in direct combat? Marcus considered the question honestly. No, Admiral. In direct combat we would have been destroyed. They had superior numbers, superior defensive positions, and adequate training. We would have died in the first hour. So you cheated. I adapted. Fighting isn't about honor or glory. It's about achieving objectives. I was given a mission I couldn't complete through conventional means. So I used unconventional means. Human means, another commander said. It wasn't quite an insult, but it wasn't quite a compliment either. Yes, human means. We're not strong, so we outlast. We're not fast, so we're patient. We're not naturally armed, so we use our minds. That's what makes us dangerous. We'll use any advantage, any tactic, any method that works. Because winning is more important than how you win. The Krathun commander, now a prisoner but treated with respect, spoke up via holocom. I have fought many species in my career. None were like humans. Most species fight until they win or until they're defeated. Humans fight until the other side gives up. They make you quit. That's different. He struggled for the word. Inevitable, Marcus nodded. That's the point, Commander. When humans commit to something, we become inevitable. We don't stop. Can't stop. Won't stop. That's our evolution. That's our nature. We're the species that walked on our moon because it was there, that crossed oceans on wooden boats to see what was on the other side.